good afternoon, everyone. I am Raluca Epureanu, the founder of Flare Makers, and I had the joy of starting my entrepreneurship journey in United Kingdom, where I have been introduced to this angel investment scheme, which we are about to talk. However, before we start, can you please, I would love to know who is in the room. Can you please put your hands up if you are a private investor? Have you ever invested in a startup? 5, 3, 4, 5? Do we have any startup founders in the room? Any startup founders? Early stage startup founders? Excellent. So that will definitely excite you. So I was saying that together with, I hope this is working. I think I clicked twice. Okay. I was saying that we started our entrepreneurship journey in the UK, and we had the opportunity to raise funds under the SEIS scheme. Now, what we're going to do in the next few minutes, we would like to talk about what this scheme is, what are these letters, what the scheme is about, and how are we planning to replicate this in Romania. Okay? So, talking about the scheme, before we actually get into the details, I would love to say a very big thank you to the companies that are supporting us. So all these big brands on the screen said, yes, we are supporting you so you can bring this SEIS scheme from UK to Romania. What I'm trying to say here is that there is a lot of investor validation and a need for this. Now, we were going to play a bit of a catch-up because I can see that the slides are moving on their own. But essentially, in the early 90s in the UK, they created this scheme as a solution for a market failure, which was, the market failure was the access to finance for early stage startups. For those of you in the room that are founders, you completely know what it means to raise capital early stage. However, in order to do this, in I would say 2022, the UK government said, "Hey, we had a scheme. We had the scheme around for a while. We seek to understand if this scheme is actually working. Do we achieve our own objectives? What the scheme is trying to do?" And I'm pleased to say, I'm clicking on this, but the slides are not in sync with me, so it's a bit of a... We need to be on the... Okay, this is the right slide. Okay, thank you. So I was saying, in the early 90s, UK had this in place, and they did a research in 2022 to see if the scheme is actually working. And what they discovered was that the startups that were raising through this scheme, they actually boost their performance and economic growth. In simple terms, they look at the 3 areas, and that was increased sales, which is basically reflected into the GDP, increase in assets, so the early stage startups that were raising through this scheme were able to invest in products, and launch innovative products. And the third area of the impact was the employment. Early stage founders that were raising through this scheme were able to, pay salary and employ more people. So in simple words, the scheme, what does it involve? As an investor, you are receiving 50% of the amount that you invested in a tax break. You don't pay taxes on your capital gains, and you are also protected if the startup that you invested in fails. But that's a lot of wording, and I would like to invite Sebastian to actually show us what the scheme works, a positive example and a negative example.
Thank you very much, Raluca. I think it's all right, the sound. So first of all, very nice meeting all of you here. quite a fantastic mix between founders, investors, builders, creators, operators. Really lovely to be in front of you. And as you may know already, interacting with startups, it's very cool. You are building the future of technologies, but they are the riskiest investments. So the whole idea of RISE is how do we make the riskiest investments risk permissive for investors to deploy the capital. That's why, okay, so we have two use cases. If we're looking at it, let's say you are an individual which has a salary as a main income, and then you have secondaries type of incomes, okay? Where from dividends, where you have to pay taxes. In Romanian taxation systems, mainly you have to pay the 10% on the main income, and then you have the CIS and the CAS, which gather together goes around 43 to 45%. The way that we would like to work this system, borrowing from the UK, it's as a startup, you're applying to a certificate, where that certificate will allow you to provide to your investors 50% of the investment that they are making it. How will that work? The investor, let's say, will give you 20,000 euro. Out of the 20,000 euro, once he invested in your startup and you are giving the certificate and you allocate the shares, the investor will use that certificate to the ANAF, the National Finance Institution in Romania, to reduce 50% of that amount, so 10,000 euros, of the next taxes he has to pay. Let's say total from his all income streams, that investor have to pay above 30,000 euros. So he will receive 10,000 euro discount on these taxes. More specifically, he can also carry out this discount across multiple years. So you are getting 10,000 back, already decrease the risk. Let's say the startup grows 3 times. Goes 3 times the value you invested. You invested at 1 million. The startup does a beautiful exit at 3 million. So you actually received, for the 20,000, you will receive 60,000 back. From an investment of 20,000 euro, you made back on 3 times return actual 640%. That's beautiful. But the biggest problem is what happens if you lose your money. Most of the startups, when they fundraise, the investors will ask, okay, if I give it X amount of money, how will I make it back? How do I know we will not lose my money? In a negative case, let's take it that way, the same example with 20,000 euro, you are receiving on your investment immediately the 50% off, which you will be able to discount it from your taxes. So your risk reduced to 10,000 euro, to half. And if the startup fails in more than 3 years, in year 5, something didn't work out, you will be covered with another 30% that you can claim under this scheme. So it's beautiful if the startup grows, but if the startup fails, from a 20,000 investment you are making, you're reducing your risk to only 5,500. So the way that this system works will create a risk which can be managed to incentivize the money we can deploy into building innovation and having the next sort of unicorns built in Romania by the beautiful minds that we have across the country. That's how Startup RISE Hub evolved and been created, just to provide by founders, by investors, and operators that want to gather together to create these sort of policies and to develop the innovation and the companies in Romania. Thank you. I will let
Why
Mircea.
do we need this here, Mircea? Over to you.
I can share the local perspective as I'm living in Cluj. And I think I have a double role, given the context that you set with RISE Romania. On one side, I'm part of the board of RoStartup, which is the association having as members various organizations in Romania with the purpose to support the startup ecosystem. So we talk about incubators, accelerators, communities, several consultancy companies, program managers, and as well angel networks. And the purpose of all of us getting together is to have one voice when it comes to changing laws, changing the legal system, which to be more advantageous for startups and innovators, as well providing feedback whenever is needed on terms of how to improve the system, the funding for startups and so on, and also to help the ecosystem grow all together on the exterior, like promoting ourselves outside through one voice. So RoStartup is like a channel in which there is a challenge or there is an incoming message which can be easily distributed to the other organizations in the ecosystem. And as well help the organizations with the funding. RoStartup is not working specifically directly with startups, but with the enablers, we call them. So in this context, we work with a couple of ministries with the purpose to ensure that there is a proper communication and make the voice of startups heard. As well in communication with Rebele and as well with Ropea, other organizations which are trying to set the course right for what we can do in Romania in terms of innovation. And on the other side, being a founder of Transylvania Angels Network basically means that I deal with, I look at UK and see, wow, that's interesting. And I remember the second investment, one of the startups we had moved to UK because of something like this. They had this advantage, and it was 2018 or 19. So we don't have something like this in Romania, but we saw a lot of challenges in the angel networks and angel investment sector, because we don't have incentives for investing in startups like tax reliefs. The rate that startups die is quite heavy, and many of the startups are not returning anything. So it's some invested capital in Romanian startups, which is not having a strong effect on the long-term except education, because a failure means an education in the end, educational process for the founder to start again. And on the other side, we know that very few people who have money in Romania are actually investing and taking the risk in startups. And a scheme like this can really help us be unlocking 97% of people who have money enough in order to spend on startup investment. Of course, hopefully will generate a couple of times more back, and some startups will die, but there will be some which will be exited successfully. So we believe that a scheme like this will be really helpful and incentivizes people who are not that risk keen as the angel investors nowadays, which we can count to 400 people in Romania, but we can talk about 10,000 to 20 or 30,000 people who could invest in startups as they have the money, but they don't have the incentive, they don't have the risk appetite for this, and a scheme like this can actually make things more open for them, more easier to do. It's an incentive in the end. And of course this money, they will return to the government as well, because it's taxes paid by the employees of the startup, by the startup itself, and it's proven again and again in our countries, like in UK, that this can actually provide back to the government money. In time, of course, it's not going to be the first year, second, but from the third year on, there will be back to the public budget. Thank you.
On that note, I would like to continue on what you just mentioned. The UK government had this scheme since, as Raluca mentioned, since the beginning of the year 2000, 1995, something like that, okay? The discount they provided, they had a lot of data sets to calculate the impact in years. I know it comes from an investment from the government, but statistically speaking, from this discount, the government received back £2 in direct investments from every pound they invested. So they doubled the investment within the first 2 years. And how that happened? It happens through the taxes paid in salaries, in the returns from the companies, in the growth of the whole ecosystem. And statistically speaking, in longer term and secondary benefits, they will actually calculate it. They got a return of 8 times the investment made. So it's both beneficiary for the ecosystem, but for the government as well.
Excellent. I know we are, the time is up, but allow me to say that none of this work and all the statistics that you just heard wouldn't have been possible without our amazing colleague, Diana Spiridon, who actually works for Innovate UK, talking about experts. Love you. She was able to facilitate and give us all this data, and she's actually a super active member of our team. So if you see RISE around, it's the crazy team that believes that we can bring the angel investment law in Romania. Pam pam.
Definitely. Mic drop to this. A mic drop to this and all our support.